Betmaker Show. This is the NFL off-season analysis and preview for Friday, June 12th, 2020. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
All right, folks, we're talking football, specifically NFL. Brian Blessing, Bruce Marshall. We're in Las Vegas. Bruce, of course, from the legendary publication The Gold Sheet. Before we get to the NFL, Bruce, just an overview on all the big stuff. Things have reopened. Obviously, we had the unrest and protests. We're starting to see some spiking in some markets. I don't know. You watch the media. We're back to that again. And I don't know that it's a Chicken Little, the sky is falling kind of thing, but it clearly bears watching. But before we get to the NFL, the one group that stuck their neck out to a degree, not stuck their neck out, they finally said something, is college football, who actually unveiled a plan for coaches to be able to organize meetings, practices, weight rooms, and the premise of a return for college football, which we'll lump into this podcast here. But that is a big development in hopes that we were all terrified about the prospects of college football.
Yeah, the one thing we've learned the last 3 months is, things can change really quick, and the narrative for sports and the lockdowns and all, it looked like it was lifting, but we'll see. Things can change around, as has been the case from the start. Though football has been blessed by just the calendar here. And the timing of it has allowed it a little bit more flexibility in trying to look forward, because it's still off into the future, although it is getting closer. I'm a little less enthused about the chances with baseball coming back, and then we'll see about the NHL and NBA. But at least the time is moving quick, though. I mean, we're almost into the middle of June now, and before we know it, we'll be into August with the preseason games, which are still on the schedule. And that should be, we'll the first NFL action we see, as the plan is only about 2 months away now. So are we really going to get there? We'll see. They are playing, by the way, overseas in Europe at soccer, and most of the major leagues, the big leagues, will have opened up by next week. Spain's opened up this week. Germany's already open. EPL opens up soon, and so does Serie A in Italy. By the way, they'll be playing 2 matches a week in Spain into late July, and England might be doing something of the same. So it'll be soccer almost every day. So they're getting going. And I still think sport here is taking a look at overseas and how that's proceeding.
And this is not a political thing, but when we handicap games or we break things down, you're trying to handicap the playing field, the participants, and come to a decision. The only thing I would say on a broad brush statement here, and to get your take on it, the NHL had their return to play plan. They've said, okay, now we've got a firm date for training camps. They're moving forward, but they were going to name the hub cities. I think they were ready to do that. Then you had the situation, the George Floyd situation, horrible, but then the unrest, and in all the cities that were going to be the hub cities, there were protests. Clearly that set them back a couple of weeks where they couldn't, make the decision on where are they exactly going to play these games. So that remains in flux. And then the only thing that just, Bruce, is amazing to me is, we go through all the unrest for 2 weeks and not a word about the virus. The virus ain't a thing. And now the virus is a thing again. And doctors and models come out yesterday and saying 200,000 deaths by the end of August, second wave, and the stock market drives off a cliff, and I don't know, bud. I don't know. They don't know. That's what is insane about this whole thing, is the models have been wrong from the get-go on this thing, and now they come out and get the doom and gloom thing, and the stock market, and I don't know what the reaction is going to be from the sporting world.
Yeah,
and you know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't know. They could be right, but they haven't been right to this point. But they just listen to this thing and the fear-mongering nonsense again.
Yeah, things change, like you said. I mean, the news cycles can flip around really quick in a very short period of time, and it impacts sports in a way too. But like I mention, I mean, the calendar is moving here. And we thought back in late March that by this time you'd have some firm dates. And we sort of do have firm dates, but there's been no in all these sports, non-NFL sports. But things, the goalposts keep moving, or the basket keeps moving, or the net keeps moving, and things move. You know, at some point, you talk to some fans now, and some of them think, you know what, this thing with the NHL and the NBA, let's just start the next season. Just forget this trying to finish up the season the way they do it. There's more sentiment now growing for that, and to try to get back on a normal calendar, because, you know, October, November is not even that far away now. And if they finish their seasons, then they're disrupted seasons, and the new season doesn't start until December.
I think to your point, to make the case for that belief would be, and I think when hockey and hoops return, and baseball can't get out of their own way. But it's when, not if, but when a player, an athlete, a member of the traveling party or whatever, when somebody tests positive, are they able to soldier through it? But if they start up and one team, you know, gets crushed by this thing, and there's like that Armageddon scenario in that regard. I'm not trying to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but if something really bad happened there, trying to wrap up, you know, this past season, the impact it would have on all sports next year could be cataclysmic.
Yeah. At some point, you just think, let's just aim to start next season again, and more and more people think this might be sort of a farce the way they're trying to finish up this current season and try to get back into normal. Because like I said, we're already almost halfway through the year. We'll be to the fall very, very soon, and let's try to get back on something normal. But even that, you know, we don't know how this is going to look in the fall. I mean, things are going to be news changes, and who knows about the virus stuff. We'll just have to see. But as from the start, football and the NFL in particular have gotten a huge break from the calendar here. They have had the luxury of time to sort things out. And at least at the moment, they are tentatively planning, and not just tentatively, I mean, altogether planning to do it like normal in the fall. We'll see.
It's funny, you brought up a topic, and give credit, is on ESPN.com. And it's funny, maybe you've done this. I freely will say I have not. And the thing is, when we talk about college football, a really big deal when you're doing season win totals or plotting a course for college football, you're looking at experience and returning starters. And I've really never put that much credence into the NFL, with free agency and pro sports are different than college sports. But ESPN's got an article out about returning experience, and it's a really intriguing article. And it's funny, you know, Kansas City is number 2 in terms of returning starters, and the belief right out of the gate is Kansas City, Baltimore. I don't know, 2-horse race is a little strong, but the premier 2 teams in the AFC are Kansas City and Baltimore. And my belief has been, talking about this, that the 2 main dangers to, you know, if you want to call them upsetters, to come out of the AFC this year would be Buffalo and Indianapolis. And lo and behold, the Bills are number 1 in terms of returning experience, and the Colts are number 3.
Yeah, I thought that list was kind of interesting, because most of the teams at the top of the list are from playoff teams from last year. So you have to go down. I guess, you know, Pittsburgh, which should have an asterisk anyway from last year because of all the injuries in Big Ben. The Steelers were at number 5 on the list, but then you have to go down all the way to 8, Jacksonville, for the next team that didn't make the playoffs last year. And like I said, Pittsburgh was sort of a unique case. So it's continuity for the teams that did better last year. Seems to be the rule rather than the exception here. I thought, though, the most interesting thing in the top 10, Brian, was the fact that Tampa Bay was at number 9, and this doesn't count.
Brady and Gronkowski.
Brady and Gronk don't count as guys who are snaps returning, and they figure to have upgraded with those 2 guys. At least that's the thought. So it is an intriguing list, and but I thought it's also illuminating that those the strongest teams are the ones right at the top.
But the funny thing is, you can go both ways of it, right? I mean, there's two sides to a coin. Houston is number 6 with 79.5% of the roster returning, except Hopkins ain't one of them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. One or two guys who are missing or are coming in could certainly alter this thing a lot. And that's true. I thought it was interesting. Wait, the bottom of the list, we got a team like Dallas that so many people are so excited about right now. And they were number 30 on the list. And I didn't know that Dallas did that much turnover, but actually it did. There's a lot of position players that made moves from Jerry Jones's roster in the offseason there. So there are some surprises as you go, as you peruse down this list.
The other thing I would say, if you were looking at something along these lines when you're doing your handicapping, and do it to college football as well, I think there are levels and tiers to experience returning starters, and I'll never forget. And there are some publications, and it's sensory overload. It's like you got all this stuff. It's like, well, great, all that stuff's there. What's the Cliff Notes version here? What's the summation? But you can sit there, though many places say, oh, this team has 7 returning starters on offense and the actual, or on defense, let's say. And the actual fact of the matter is, no, they have 10. They actually, some places actually only count the guys that are on the field for the first snap of the game as a returning starter. But in football, with an age of specialization, the nickel cornerback that comes in and plays 60% of the snaps, even though technically he's not out there on first down, but he's playing 60% of the game. He's a starter.
That's why I have long thought, especially in college football, this makes it's overvalued, but returning starters get way overvalued. Now, there's a couple positions. Yeah, quarterback, a good quarterback. That's great to have back, and it's worth a couple of other positions, a couple, a strength rating. But it's what you said. It's snaps returning. That's the most. If you're going to look at that with the returning angle, it's snaps, not starters generally, because teams rotate in players all the time. I mean, it's the same guys don't start and play every snap every game. I mean, there's plenty of guys who get in every game. There's rotations, and most position groups do that, and especially, you mentioned the nickel coverages and things like that. And offenses do the thing, their third down packages and all. That's why snaps returning is if you're going to look at that, that's a more meaningful stat than the starters returning. And that's why I kind of thought this chart was more interesting than most we see in this regard.
Well, at the top of the list, I would just say to you, okay, for arguments like you said, Houston, great. Okay, they have 78%, but their main weapon, is not there anymore. Tampa Bay, add 2 guys that aren't even counted into it. But like the Buffalo thing, even though they're already number 1 with 88% of the snaps returning, Bruce, I would say that number should be even higher, because basically their rotation on the defensive line, you got a second-year guy in Ed Oliver. They've got 8 defensive linemen, and they are going to rotate fresh. They've got 8 starters is the way they're going to approach this, and they got a defensive end in their first pick of the draft. They're going to actually be rolling in all kinds of fresh guys. And, oh, by the way, the Bills thing doesn't count the Stephon Diggs acquisition.
Sure. And, the Bills, too, are one of the teams as well. Yeah, the coach is coming back. All of his coordinators are returning as well. That's another thing, too. Continuity applies to the coaching staffs as well. And you wonder in this offseason that teams that started anew with new staffs, teams like Carolina and others that have brought new coaches in there and new staffs, in Carolina's case, a lot of these guys have been brought in from the college ranks. I mean, they really could have maybe used the offseason a little bit more than some of the other teams, a traditional offseason, which they haven't had. So you wonder if it's going to impact, some of those teams a little bit more than others. Quarterback, though, is also an interesting one, and, continuity there or just quality there. It's sort of reflected. Houston, imagine if Houston had lost to Deshaun Watson, now that thing would have completely been misleading on the Houston side if he had gone out. It's bad enough that they lost Hopkins. Pittsburgh ranks 5. We mentioned them in the earlier conversation here. Pittsburgh ranks 5, and that's pretty interesting. Also because Ben Roethlisberger probably shouldn't count in that, because he only played just briefly last year, so he really wasn't the starter. But you add him into the mix, and it would figure to be the same thing. The other thing you look at also, the assistant coaches returning to. We mentioned the coordinators, but just the non-coordinators returning, and that's part of the whole continuity thing. And Buffalo, by the way, ranks very high in that too. And can you imagine they've got 20 of their 22 assistants are back as well. So there's been almost no turnover on staff either. So that's why another reason the Bills rank so high on this list.
Betmaker, let's make some money tonight.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. I'd be curious, Bruce, and I think it's an interesting discussion and how it will actually play out. I would draw the analogy like a hockey. We've seen coaching changes happen midstream, and it works. And last year, the Blues won the Cup with a new coach. We've seen that happen in Pittsburgh. We've seen a boatload of times that's happened. Now you throw this break into the mix, and like right here in Vegas, okay, they had a coaching change, and they were starting to go the right way, and things were looking really good. Then the break comes. Now all of a sudden you got to reconvene, and the stuff that the new coach was coming in, like, do they have to start over? And to me, the break did not serve them well. And I'd be very curious. There's always turnover with coaches in the NFL. The fact that this is, they're going to get there, but it's been a real altered deal where everything's been virtual team meetings and all this other stuff. Would you be of the mindset that you almost have to give them a mini pass? And would you be more inclined to fade teams that had a coaching change because of the bizarre circumstances we're dealing this summer in terms of them trying to, put a stamp on a team?
It's possible, Brian, and I'd be tempted to do that. I think all these things, we mentioned this before, they're like a snowflake, and each situation is different. But in general, I'd probably be looking to shade that and then trying to find some evidence to support it, and that might be an angle. Here's another angle I think that might play into that, Brian. When you're talking about, we mentioned preseason a moment ago. We know we can bet on this stuff, and if it is a normal preseason and they are indeed playing games in August, some of these teams that would normally hardly be playing starters in August, they might, and especially in a situation with a new coach and a few new players, August might be a little bit more serious, the games for them, just to give them more snaps together and get more live action under their belts. And I think it could also alter some of the preseason dynamics that we've seen that have been pretty well ingrained in recent years. And we'll be talking about this a lot in August, but in more immediate, I'm wondering if I might change some of the preseason dynamics as some of the teams really try and they use it more as real game situation as opposed to just the low-key way that a lot of teams have done it in the past.
And again, purely speculative. We don't know, and it's a ways away. But we're seeing the return of golf without fans. NASCAR's slowly starting to let fans creep back in. But in terms of football, again, football without fans, the communication for offenses will be much better. I really do. I believe the fewer fans that are there, the more points that will be scored, specifically with visiting teams. But that remains to be seen, just what we're looking at. But again, these are all things we have to consider that normally we trudge through and do all our work, and here's another season and let's go. This is a completely different kettle of fish.
It is, and just from a viewing perspective, I don't think it's going to be quite the same entertainment for even fans at home watching on TVs. If there's no spectators at the games, that I don't know how that impacts all the numbers and everything, but I think it's going to be a different and not necessarily a better viewing experience. There's great entertainment in watching, the crowds at some of the NFL games and all the sideline stuff, and that's part of the whole entertainment package. So it's not the most important, but we're removing that, at least just from a enjoyment perspective. Watching it, it's going to be a little bit of a lot of an adjustment. I think being without that, I think is going to jar some fans who are normally love to soak in the whole football entertainment package there, but part of it's going to be missing.
And I'll throw it back at you. Just some of the other topics that are catching your eye at this moment? I don't want to leave anything on the cutting room floor here.
Yeah, it's just June is usually, like we mentioned, it's a slowdown. The teams oftentimes they don't take June off, but this is after free agency. It's after the draft. It's before training camps start, and this is actually the month when a lot of coaches, they take vacations usually in June because they are working feverishly in the off season to do all those things that we mentioned a moment ago. But when you get to June, they need a break at some point, and this is like when coaches historically take vacations in June. So there's not going to be a lot of stuff that we're going to be seeing. We'll get a second wave of free. Second wave. I got to be careful how we say that. Not Corona. The free agents that haven't signed, usually right before camp, we get a few more free agent signings, the guys who haven't signed thus far. There are still a few out there, and there's nothing to say they can't sign before you get to camp either. So you'd be looking at a Cam Newton. You'd be looking at Jadeveon Clowney, who has yet to surface somewhere. Those are two very big names. I dare say that Clowney is the biggest name out on the board. He could still end up in a lot of places. The Jets are a new team that has entered the mix here because they've released some players since the draft and have opened up some cap space. There are a few more players for a big-name guy like Clowney. Jason Peters, very interesting, left tackle from the Eagles. I think he could be a valuable fit. He's 38 years old. He's a probable Hall of Famer coming up. The Eagles still might bring him back. I thought he'd be a nice fit there for Denver. Garrett Bowles, you got your replacement right there, at least for a year, and then address it again in the draft next season. He could certainly land somewhere. So there's still some free agent names out there, and of course the Cam mystery continues, and a lot of people are wondering where and when he's going to end up somewhere, and he's probably just waiting. And if he's not rushing it, the chances for him to be a starter right now, it's hard to go in and be a starter, but wait till August. Things happen. There could be starters hurt in camp. There's always that stuff, Brian, in August that happen in quarterback rotations, and things change. And I'll guarantee you, if one team loses a starting, and it seems to happen every year, if you need a quarterback bad in August and Cam is still out there, he's going to be your guy. So that's why another reason I think he might be getting a better deal if he waits just a little longer into August for his eventual landing spot this season.
Hey, Bruce, we'll wrap it up with this, but it's a theme thing where you're talking about how fast time goes. You're a Broncos fan. Nobody gives you grief about that. I get pummeled for being a Bills fan. But when you said Jason Peters, I cringed. When you said he's 38, my God, it seems like it was yesterday. I'll never forget, the Bills drafted this guy out of Arkansas. He was a tight end, and they saw something and said, we can mold this guy into a lineman. They brought him in. They stuffed him on the practice squad, said put 80 pounds on, and they're going, wait till you see this guy we got. And I'm telling anybody who listen, well, they got this lineman, this Jason Peters guy. This is going to be a home run. They made a draft pick and invested in the future, and lo and behold, the guy's going to end up going into the Hall of Fame when he was an afterthought in the draft. And give him credit. Somebody saw something. And honestly, if Peters could have stayed healthy the majority of his career, he may have been one of the most dominant left tackles in the history of the sport.
The real sobering thing is, Brian, we talk about these the old timers like Peters, 38, and Brady and whatever, and now we look at them and we're old enough to be they could be our sons. I mean, the same age. We could be their we're old enough where we could be their dads. So that's how time's really going on fast. I mean, we're so much older now than the oldest guys in the NFL. That's just the way things go, I guess.
Tick, 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 tick is the summation here, how fast the clock goes. Hopefully we're trending the right way. Always great information. Our good friend Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet. I'm Brian Blessing in Las Vegas, and we'll reconvene next week. Betmaker, let's make some money tonight. Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com. And reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At Betmaker.com and the Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling, an approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.